place. I'd also very much like to thank the Canadian Law and Society Association and my home university of Wollongong, Ontario, for generously providing assistance to be here. And lastly, but most importantly, I thank my wife for coming with me on this trip to Australia, which certainly makes it much more pleasurable than it would be otherwise, but it's certainly pleasurable anyway. Okay, so my topic, the general theme of my research is wrongful convictions and miscarriages of justice. This is an incredibly important area in criminal justice these days. It has been, for the last 30 years, recognized as perhaps the most important area for reform. Now we recognize that thousands and thousands of innocent persons are wrongly convicted every year in virtually every Western democracy. Daniel Nedwig, who is an American scholar in 2008, called wrongful convictions the civil rights movement of the 21st century, and I think that's an apt description. My particular research within that broad field of wrongful convictions is in fact compensation for wrongful convictions. So in fact, once somebody is blessed with the exoneration of their accusation of criminality, what do states do to in fact compensate them to at least, hopefully allow them to restart a life which most assuredly has been destroyed if they've been incarcerated for any modest period of time. My research is comparative, and this is a chart that basically sets out in broad terms what the fundamental avenues for compensation are in the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. All jurisdictions have provisions that allow for compensation in the event a human right has been abridged. In Canada, that means the Canadian Charter of Rights and Values, or Rights and Freedoms. Some jurisdictions have statutory relief with respect to compensation. In this table, it's the UK, which has had statute-enabled compensation since 1988, and the United States. So in the United States, there are 32 states plus the federal government and the District of Columbia that actually have statutes in place to allow those who have been wrongly convicted to seek compensation, and they vary tremendously from a low of $5,000 per year, capped at about $20,000, that's Wisconsin, to what I like to think is a real irony, and that's the state of Texas. The state of Texas, which has the highest rate of capital punishment in the United States, probably provides the best scheme for compensation. So they allow up to $100,000 per year, and it's unlimited over the number of years you've been incarcerated if you've been on death row. So in Texas, they don't kill you, they'll pay you. There's a non-statutory scheme in all jurisdictions, which is basically the executive, so the cabinet of the various governments in play, do allow for compensation. This is a highly politically motivated scheme where the government acknowledges that somebody's been wrongly convicted. It tends to be somebody who has had a lot of press and media attention, and the government tends to pay them. They pay them quite well, but they're infinitesimally few, so it's really not a very effective means of compensation. But governments do that. Of the countries that allow it, UK stopped doing it in 2006, but everybody else still does it. And the best scheme is probably New Zealand's. New Zealand's is very transparent. It's an online application, and it's quite easy to follow, so that's a nice thing to see. And then lastly, all jurisdictions allow for some tort relief with respect to wrongful convictions, and that's primarily dealing with applications or statements of claim against either the Crown Prosecuting Service or the police when they make an error. For me, that's somewhat ironic because in a prior life before I became an academic, I was in turns a federal Crown prosecutor and a police commissioner. So I'm now totally on the other side of the light to see what would have to be done in this field. So in this particular piece of work I'm talking about today is just the first piece in a broader, larger piece of research dealing with the success rates of the various tort actions seeking compensation. And so those are primarily in all jurisdictions malicious prosecution, which tends to be claims against the Crown and sometimes the police with respect to how a case is prosecuted, it requires malice to be proven for the most part, which is an incredibly high threshold to meet. Again, we have breaches of human rights or charter to be allowed for compensation. And lastly, we have what's called negligent investigation, and that is the centerpiece of this research because for the purposes of comparison, Canada is the only common law jurisdiction that does not provide immunity to the police with respect to the investigation of crime. So in Canada, if a police officer investigates a crime and doesn't do so up to the appropriate standard of care, then they will be found liable in damages. And that's what this piece of research deals with today, right? And it will be followed with research into malicious prosecution and those success rates and charter breaches. But the first piece is negligence. And I chose negligence the first piece because just intuitively, I thought, well, you know what? If there is any cause of action that should have some level of success, it should be this one, because the tort of negligence is a common tort. It's very, very well known. It's usually not one that is hard to sustain or prove. And so, if it's a tort that is allowed in Canadian jurisprudence, and it is, then how successful in fact can it be? So that's what this deals with. The basis for it goes back to a case in 1995 in the Ontario Court of Appeal called Beckstead, the Ottawa Police Service, and what that involved was a woman by the name of Gwendolyn Wall, who over the course of a couple of days noticed that funds were being drained out of her bank account as a function of somebody securing her bank card and doing withdrawals at an ATM. So it came to about $1,200. So she complained to the Ottawa Police Service about this. She pointed a finger at a woman by the name of Roxanne Beckstead and said, I think she's the one that stole my money. The police detective, who actually was quite experienced detective, who took over the case, did virtually nothing with respect to an investigation. He took down the particulars. He didn't interview Ms. Beckstead. He ignored the digital, or it wasn't digital at the time, but photography taken when machines started trying to make withdrawal. There's a picture taken. So he ignored the fact that when these two withdrawals amounting to $1,200 were taken, the picture of the person doing it had no resemblance to Roxanne Beckstead. Having said that, he arrested her, and over the course of the next 15 or 16 months and 8 appearances in court to get to a trial, by the time we got to that trial, the Crown withdrew the charge. It said, this is ridiculous. There's absolutely no evidence leading to any criminality regarding this accusation. And so what Ms. Beckstead did is she sued the Ottawa Police Service, and particularly the detective involved, for negligence, and lo and behold, the trial court and the Ontario Court of Appeal both agreed that in fact, yes, if a police officer investigates negligently, right, and that clearly has implications for your liberty and security of person, what have you, then there should be liability. So in fact, they found that there is a duty of care between police and the suspect they investigate. And that case was not appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada, which would be the next level to go to. So it was good law, at least in Ontario, for a number of years. And then we get to 2007, where a very similar case dealing with negligent investigation got there. It's called Hill versus Hamilton Wentworth. Hill is the plaintiff who was the accused, Jason Hill, and Hamilton Wentworth is the police service that did the investigation. So what happened with Jason Hill was that back in 1994-95 in the city of Hamilton, which is about an hour west of Toronto in Ontario, there were a number of robberies that took place, and the evidence taken by witnesses to these robberies, and there were 10 of them, was that the accused was Aboriginal. That was the description given. Right? So the police took that down. They understood that what that's what they were looking for. They had Jason Hill on their radar for some other small minor matter. He was Aboriginal. They said, we think you're good for this. And so what they did, and in fact what police services do when it comes to wrongful convictions, is they employed tunnel vision. Right? They only looked at him. They didn't look at any other evidence. And so they put him in an array. And the array they put him in was himself as an Aboriginal man and 11 white men. Right? And then had the witnesses identify, look at these these gentlemen before you, you recognize the perpetrator of the crime, and most witnesses said, yeah, it's the Aboriginal guy over there, right? And so the witnesses identified him. At the time, the cops in Hamilton Wentworth had plausible exculpatory evidence. They had the evidence that, in fact, it was rather some Hispanic men that may well have been the perpetrators of the crime, right? But having said that, that didn't persuade the judge and the jury, and he was convicted. Right? And so was the fact he was convicted, and while he was in custody for well over a year. 2 more similar fact robberies took place, the same MO that was in place for the prior robberies. So as a function of an appeal, Hill was acquitted. Right? Clearly the evidence was that he wasn't the guy. And so what he did is he went, relying upon Beckstead, because that was good law in Ontario at the time, he sued the Hamilton Wentworth Police Service. He sued them also for malicious prosecution and a breach of his charter, but those fell away. And he was left with, again, the negligent investigation of the police officer. And so now we're in the Supreme Court of Canada, right? So in 2007, and here, former Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin, writing for the majority of the court, basically said that yes, just as the Ontario Court of Appeal had done in Beckstead, we are going to recognize for the country as a whole that there is a duty of care between police officers and those they investigate, their suspects, because the relationship is close and personal and direct, and clearly if the job is not done properly, it's going to lead to substantial harm. And this is what she said, and it's worth reading. The unfortunate reality is that negligent policing has now been recognized as a significant contributing factor to wrongful convictions in Canada. While the vast majority of police officers perform their duties carefully and reasonably, the record shows that wrongful convictions traceable to faulty police investigations occur. Police conduct that is not malicious, not deliberate, but merely fails to comply with standards of reasonableness can be a significant cause of wrongful convictions. Right? This caught a lot of people by surprise because it was so monumental. And then all of a sudden it looked like there's now going to be an amazing amount of actions available. And within that rubric, however, unfortunately what happened is that even though the duty of care was established, the Chief Justice said that in 1995, the fact that they used 11 white men to convict one Aboriginal man did not follow the standard of care, and he lost the case. Okay, so having said that, going through all of that, clearly it looked like this would be a disappointment to everybody. So my research has been basically to look at how successful have these actions been. So here's what I've done with the numbers. So what I did is I looked at all the cases. This comes from StatScan. I looked at all the cases in 2015-16 that were criminal cases, and 342,000 change decisions, with 70,000 of them resulted in findings of guilt, but there were 12,434 people who were acquitted, and then 105,000 in some that were stayed withdrawn. So I used those last 2 numbers as potential cases where somebody could argue that in fact they were wrongly and negligently investigated. We also have this very short table. There's also an avenue of relief for those people who are wrongly convicted to go to the Minister of Justice and ask for a miscarriage of justice to be declared. And that's data for the last 16 years that shows that 17 people over 16 years, so just over 1 person per year, had this relief, so it's relatively irrelevant for the most part. Okay, so that brings me back to the research on how does negligent investigation fit into the rubric. So these are, again, my numbers. This comes from LexisNexis, which is universal for the most part. So I looked at how many cases refer to negligent or to malicious prosecution with the word tort associated with it, and the same thing for charter breach and negligence across the top. And then to filter that further, I put in names of the important decisions, Nels, the Supreme Court, Ward, the Supreme Court, and again, Beckstead and Hill, and put that in the filter. It came down with these numbers. And then after reading all those cases, basically for malicious prosecution, there are 331 cases where a suspect is at the heart of litigation. For charter breach, there are 100 cases, and for purposes of this paper, for negligent investigation, there are 114 cases, right? And that chart basically simply sets up on all the common law jurisdictions